Okay, Blythe and Mallory, I'm so excited to have you here today. Let us know, what is the big idea you are selling?
Our big idea is that everyone is creative. So, no matter what story you're telling yourself, everyone has the internal architecture for creativity, and it just needs to be nourished, just like you would take your muscles to the gym.
Ooh, I know there's going to be a lot of people that don't buy this right at the outset. And so we have a lot to dig into. So tell me a little bit more about where this idea came from. Blythe, I know your story is kind of wild. You and I go way back from, gosh, it's probably what, like 15, 16 years now.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
know you have quite a story where creativity has been woven through your life in some wild ways. So, can you take us back to a really pivotal moment in your life where creativity played a huge part?
Absolutely. So, um, when I was 22, I was walking across the street in San Francisco and I was literally run over by a Mack truck. And I, suffered so much trauma in my body and also had a head injury. Um, I was actually pronounced dead on arrival and then resuscitated, was in a coma, and then went through a very intense rehabilitation process. And creativity played a pretty instrumental role in that journey. The first was the doctors were telling me I had significant brain damage, and while I did have had a head trauma, my family was like, "Wait, no, she's always been like this. Like she's always been kind of all over the place, daydreamy. Like we're not sure how much of this is head trauma or just like she's just kind of has a creative personality." Um, and then during my whole healing process, I was really incapacitated. I wasn't even in like a normal wheelchair. I had to be horizontal because I had broken my pelvis. So I looking back now, I realized that I used sort of doodling and sketching, not really I wasn't making art, but I was using creative tools to process the trauma in an abstract way. And, like doodling. And now that we've studied the creativity or the science of creativity, it makes sense. But at the time, I didn't know what I was doing. It was just an intuitive way to sort of cycle through the trauma of the experience. So creativity was obviously hugely important to me. I actually was an art major in college, so um, I did have sort of an ongoing creative practice. And then creativity just sort of continued to weave its way through my career through several entrepreneurial experiences, including co-founding Stella and Dot, which is where we met, which
Mhm.
was an incredibly creative and inspiring experience. And one other thing I'll say about my experience at Stella and Dot as the chief creative officer for almost 17 years was what I saw in my work is when I would bring sort of a creative exercise or inspiration to team members that were outside of my creative team, I would see people's eyes light up and like I would see something in them just come alive. And I realized sort of what a powerful tool creativity was. Fast forward to COVID, um, my own kids were really struggling with Zoom school. They were like zombies. And I started bringing some of that work of like creating these 5-minute creativity exercises to my kids every morning before they got on Zoom school. And I just saw such a marked change in their mood and their just overall ability to focus that I became deeply, deeply interested in the science of creativity and what having a creative practice does to your brain.
Mm, wow. The Mack truck story is wild. that
Yeah,
is
it's wild. It's
that is wild. Do you have really vivid memories of that time when it happened, when you were recovering?
no. So what's interesting, what I now know is that I think when your brain processes sort of that level of trauma, it can bypass the sort of part of your brain that remembers things almost like a film strip. So it's almost like stored in my body. I don't remember it like you'd think, but my body has some memories of it. And that's again why creativity is so important, because it helps us process things in more of an abstract way. It can be very helpful with any sort of trauma.
Mm. So, Blythe, do you think that you went to those creative practices because you had already been doing them and there was like an intuitive part of your brain that just accessed that? And or do you think that that is something that anyone in that state could have accessed? Like, where do you think that came from? Um,
Right.
yeah.
I think absolutely anybody in that state could access it. It might have come more naturally or been more top of mind to me because I
Mhm.
had sort of like a background in like drawing. But the act of any sort of repetitive motion, whether you're doodling or writing or scribbling or anything, like not making art, but just repetitive motions with your hands, knitting, crocheting, is incredibly calming for your nervous system. But again, I didn't know any of that. I didn't
Yeah.
know the science behind it. That came later
Yes.
as
Yeah.
Mallory and I started researching it. Um, but it was intuitive to do something with my hands. And I have found, even with, my daughter Olive has ADHD. She intuitively like picked up knitting and like finger knitting. And like, so I do think on some level, even if you don't know that, and even if you don't consider yourself an artist, people can sometimes gravitate towards doing those things. But what we're trying to bring to light is the awareness of like, actually, this is something everybody should do to calm their nervous system. And, it's very accessible to everyone.
Okay. Yeah.
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 Mhm.
And Mallory, so your background is more in corporate, although Blythe, you have a little bit of that too, but you spent a decade as vice president at Sotheby's, right? Running
Yes.
campaigns, press campaigns across creative industries,
Yep.
so fine
Yeah.
art, jewelry. Talk to me a little bit about how creativity was woven into your own personal and professional life.
Well, I mean, talking about all of the like nervous system and the things that Blythe was mentioning related to her accident and how she came into, really using creativity to help. As a child, from day one, almost like at age 2, I was drawing all the time. And my mom recently sent me a book of all these old drawings that she had saved, and some of them are like 1.5 years old, 2.5.
Mm.
And I think as a child, it was calming to my nervous system. So I just naturally would go to that as something I love to do. And I think children tend to do those things naturally, like Blight said, it could be knitting or, the play of creativity is just somehow something that kids naturally gravitate towards. And that was definitely true for me, something I studied all through college. And when I graduated, I went to work at Sotheby's because I was just constantly surrounded by art. And it was the most amazing decade, surrounded by amazing pieces. I learned so much, almost more than I even learned in college being there. But I really kind of had a moment of bravery, probably in my late 20s, where I decided to go out on my own and start a business in New York, which is not an easy task.
Mm.
And that's when I really started making things. I made jewelry, which is part of the reason Blythe and I connected so much at the beginning, and tried to turn in my creative pursuits into something that could make money. So that was my first step into, you know, out of the corporate world and trying to, do something more creative.
And what was that like taking? So I think for a lot of us, and myself included, we think of creativity and then business as two
Right.
separate buckets. You have this like you're a maker or you are a money maker. So
Right.
what was it
Yeah.
like trying to marry those two worlds? Did you have a hard time with that in the beginning?
I did. I mean, I think it took a lot, many, many years. And I loved working in a corporate environment. I do really well. And, I love working with other people. It was like such an exciting time, but it took a lot of, I was always pulled towards doing something more creative. And it took a lot of kind of courage and saving up of money and getting ready to like really branch out on my own and try to do it. The hardest part is like when you make stuff, the things that are, creative works, it's very personal, and putting it out into the world also takes a little bit of bravery. And this is something that we see all the time, even in doing these daily creative practices. Sometimes people have a lot of fear around creativity and fear around showing their work. But I just took the leap, and, of course, surrounded by friends who were supportive. I never looked back, and I never regretted it. And it ultimately led me to actually teach a class through Parsons School of Design, which was incredibly scary because getting up in front of a group of students can be difficult. But I think what I learned from taking the leap on my own, and, just being brave enough to get out there and make stuff, was a really amazing thing to be able to share with a group of students. And it took me a couple of days to get into a rhythm, but that was one of the most inspiring things I've done in my career, because being able to share the value of creativity with a group of young students, these were all like teenagers, and teaching them to look at inspiration and find inspiration and turn it into something was really, really an amazing experience. And part of the reason I really wanted to partner with Blythe to do Daily Creative.
Yeah. Wait, Tim Gunn is the name that popped in my head as soon as you said Parsons.
Make it work.
Make it work. Yes. Did you ever see him or cross paths with him?
I did not. I actually ended up teaching a class outside of the city. It was in the Dominican Republic. They have a school there called Altos de Givon, and it's like a creative hub and creative community. So they flew me down there, and I had a translator, and I taught a group of students that did, many of whom did not speak English.
Wow.
But it was the most incredible experience, being like the mix of cultures, the young students. And, it's interesting because in a way, Tim Gunn and Project Runway was sort of an inspiration in the class, funny enough, because I struggled for the first couple of days in teaching, and because I was nervous, and I was instructing rather than trying to help them find inspiration. And I finally made them go outside one day and just take pictures and look for things that inspired them, and to have that be the core of what they made. And it completely changed the whole class.
Wow.
So I learned as much as they did.
Yes.
And I think that's why it was a turning point for me, and kind of understanding the importance of creativity and inspiration, and using creativity as a tool for self-discovery, which is something I think a lot of people don't realize is a benefit, that you are kind of stepping closer and closer to what resonates for you and synthesizing it and being able to put that out into the world. And that's what I learned was what I needed to teach the students.
Yes.
And I think that's in many ways what Blythe and I are trying to share with the world.
Yes.
In this movement of creativity.
Absolutely. Like we truly believe everybody has their own unique creative fingerprint. And it's just like your lens that with which you view the world. And like, what do you notice when you go around? What colors do you like? What shapes do you like? And starting to collect those pieces of information to actually form your point of view, or your taste, which is just really about like, what do you notice? And if you look back on old Project Runway episodes, Tim Gunn is very good at that. He's never like, you should do this. He's like, well, what do you think? Do you, and then he's like, make it work. But it's all about pulling the point of view out of the student, which is what Mallory was talking about.
I love that. Well, and I think also a lot of people don't necessarily know what they like. And I've even been in times where I'm like, I don't know what I like. And it just, even the smallest act of noticing can pull you as one step closer to that. And it leads you on a pathway to a really more authentic point of view, and just a, discovery of yourself and what resonates for you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the doing. And I wonder also, I feel like sometimes for me, it's figuring out what I like is some of figuring out what I don't like. Do you find that? Like, yeah.
Yes.
Like, I'm like, I don't know what I like, but I know I don't like that. I don't like that. My middle daughter is actually in a tech high school for cosmetology, and I am the worst with hair. So she will be like, what do you want with your hair? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what I want with my hair, like, but I know what I don't want. So like, I can tell you, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And she's like, okay, so you kind of want this. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I want. So I do think like
great way to back into it. Actually.
Weeding out what we don't like. Yeah. So tell me about, go ahead, Blythe.
No, I think that touches on something that we've tried to do with Daily Creative and especially the book, which is like a blank slate is really hard. It's really
Yes.
intimidating to look at a
Mhm.
blank page of paper and you have to think about
Yeah.
what to draw and then you have to think, but if you're given things to react against, like whether it's a constraint or whether it's, a framework or whether it's here's, some examples and you eliminate what you don't like, that sort of helps you in a less intimidating way hone in on your own point of view and your your innate creativity.
Absolutely. Yeah, the blank slate is incredibly overwhelming, and I do think that is what intimidates a lot of people and makes them think,
Totally.
I'm not
Yeah.
creative. I don't know what to do with this. So how did the two of you come together? I know you go way back. So what's the origin story of Blythe and Mallory?
We met, I mean, really, well, we met through her husband Curtis, but we really met when we had babies and we had so many shared passions. It was kind
Yeah.
of like an instant like bestie spark. We were like, oh my gosh, we're like soul sisters.
Aw.
And then we really like co-raised our
Yeah.
kids together. And kind of also did art and, these creative projects on the side. So it was all kind of blended together in this big sort of creative collaboration. And then during the pandemic, we started doing art together virtually. And, we were part of sort of a group doing art, on Zoom. And we were like, we have to bring some sort of creativity to more people. And by the way, we did not mean we want to bring art making to people because I do
Right.
think there's a distinction. Like people tend to conflate creativity with technical drawing ability, and creativity is so much more. It's like taking a leap to start your own business, finding your point of view, really anywhere you're putting yourself and your own point of view out into the world. Like we consider that to be a creative act. And we wanted to broaden that definition of creativity and make it accessible to more people. And we wanted to do something together.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, I think when our kids were young, our lives folded together so naturally because as you know, when you are raising kids, having someone to do it with you, it makes it way more fun.
Mhm.
So, and we just are both naturally creative and we would have the kids like putting flowers all in their hair and dressing up and, we loved it. But at the same time, when we dropped them off for camp, we would drive to do an art class together. And we just kind of kept that little spark going because we were both, just in need of a creative outlet at that time. But I think during COVID, it was such a time where everyone was kind of reevaluating their lives and like things were changing. And we just sort of had the aha moment of like, maybe if not now, when?
And parenting and our kids were actually a great training ground for this work because our kids are each creative in different ways. My
Yeah.
kids are more traditionally like they like to draw or like little things. Her kids are
My
like
kids are like
dancing
wild,
and like
running
DJs
around, like, need
and
to be
running
moving.
around.
Yeah.
They actually don't like the small
Boys.
motor
Yeah.
control things. So it was like finding a pathway, into
They're
each
all-
of them expressing themselves.
Exactly.
In
They're
different
all
ways.
they're all different and there's a creative pathway for each of them and for everyone.
Yeah,
And
I'm
that's-
so I'm so glad we're going there because I did want to spend some time on this because listening to both of you, you are both artists. Sounds like in the traditional sense, you're makers, you're jewelry makers. And that is where my brain goes. And I think most of our brain goes when we think of creativity. Like I have a blank canvas or I have these materials in front of me and I need to create something.
Right.
And for me and many people, that is not a God-given gift. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. But then I think, well, but give me a piece of paper and tell me to write about something and I can fill it nonstop, and I think my Emmy, my daughter that I just talked about who does hair, she'll tell me all the time, I'm not creative, but she creates these gorgeous hairstyles, which is so
Right.
creative.
That's
yes.
creative. Yeah.
Right, right. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Can you kind of paint some big, broad brush strokes, if you will, of different ways that people are creative that is outside of the box that we might not be thinking of traditionally?
Absolutely. And that's kind of one of our starting points for this was we like went behind the scenes with like tattoo artists and DJs and florists and chefs and
Yeah.
like
I mean,
writers. And like there's so many different ways to be creative. Those are all examples of either like working professional creatives though, or like creative hobbies. But what we became really interested in honing in on with the and when we started researching is actually this concept of mini C creativity, which is practicing creativity of any form for just a few minutes a day has incredible health benefits.
And without thinking about the outcome.
Yeah.
So it's just the doing without thinking about what you're making.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is where the Daily Creative was born, right? So
Yes.
let's
No,
talk about
absolutely.
let's talk about the book. Like, how did you go from everyone is creative and we should do something about this to creating this beautiful book?
I mean, we spent a few years sort of thinking, like honing in on what we wanted to do. We got some incredible like research partners, like from universities, and we sort of delved into the science. Ultimately, we felt really passionate about creating something that was analog, because we do really believe in the act of putting pen to paper, and the therapeutic benefits, and so that kind of led us to pitch this book idea. And the concept was to expose people to just 60 different ways that you could develop a creative habit, hoping that they would find a few that really spoke to them, that they could sort of introduce into their, morning coffee routine every morning. And one of the inspirations was frankly Wordle. Like, what can you do that's doesn't require a lot of materials, requires no technical skill, is super easy, and could be like a daily practice for everybody from a working professional creative to somebody who vehemently considers themselves not creative, like, and still be not intimidating. And we had so much fun because we just got to do the artwork for like, all these fun exercises that we kind of intuitively made up, but also vetted through researchers.
Scientists. Yeah. And in the years when we first started, we went out and interviewed so many different creators, like Blythe said, like chefs, cooks, tattoo artists. And what we discovered is that, there's just a natural feeling from people that are doing something creative as their job that is, they feel like they're the luckiest people in the world and they're getting all these benefits. And we then started to delve in more to studying what are the benefits of creativity, because we had felt them. I mean, it was obvious to us. And that really, I think, led us to kind of first we wanted to share it with everyone, and especially people that consider themselves non-creative, because it really doesn't take having to make something. It's just like getting it activated in a way that works for you. So the book itself has a real variety. Some things are more about noticing. Others are about listening. There are, a few writing exercises. There's so many different ways to do it. And I think we just wanted to put a group of them out there so that people could find a starting point that worked for them and feel inspired to have a more regular practice.
Yeah.
So we love nothing.
I love the variety. Like I really do love the variety. And it's funny how you do find the things that you connect with more, like the naming of the colors. I was like, oh, that felt really good to me versus some of the other drawing. I was like, oh, I'm not very good at this. And I do feel like I struggled with not attaching myself to the outcome and just attaching myself to the practice. But the more you do it, the easier that gets.
Well, I love that you're being the wordsmith, that you gravitated to the words, color naming. So many people have told us that they love that exercise.
Yes.
But it's good to be both challenged and then at the same time find something you really love that you just groove with. But that's a really fun one, I think.
And part of the process is sort of noticing when perfectionism kicks in and noticing when you're like, wait, am I doing this right? Especially with anything that requires any sort of doodling, and just noticing and saying like, thank you. Like, but I'm just going to keep doing this.
Yeah. What's interesting is, I got 5 copies of the book. You were kind enough to send me 1 or 2, and then I ordered some others and I put them on our kitchen table. We have like a little tray, and I put them there. And so everyone has a copy that has their initial on it. This is my son Bennett's.
I love that.
Yeah. And so like, I'm just trying to pull something up that he's done, but yeah, like what sounds can you hear right now? Barking, baseball glove sound, TV.
Oh,
But
I love that.
yeah, so that
Be
when
so happy.
everybody says I have nothing to do, I'm like, well, open a page to the book. But what was really interesting is we are a family that is achievement driven. I mean, competitive.
Yeah.
Everyone has threads of perfectionism in them. And so I found that when the kids were doing, even myself, we're doing the same page, everyone's like looking at each other's page, like, why does yours look better than mine? Oh, your color names are better, so it's just so interesting how that
Totally.
human desire to achieve, at least for us, kicks in even when you're not supposed to be doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
No, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, and it's becomes bonding. I mean, some of the workshops we've done, at first we've had people come in and they're like, oh no, like we don't want to do creativity. And then once things loosen up a little bit, it is bonding and it's funny. Even if you're competitive, you're like, oh, you end up getting something out of it. It ends up being fun despite that side.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about like the research and the science behind this, because these are things that right now we've talked about, both of you intuitively noticing in your own work, but there is actual research behind this. In fact, Blythe, you mentioned a NASA study, and then there was, I forget exactly where it came from, but there was a huge article that came out that creativity is actually the fifth or fourth pillar of health. So let's dive into that a little bit.
So I'll touch on the NASA study,
Okay.
and then one of the studies we looked at was commissioned by NASA in the 1960s to try and help them identify hires. Basically, they wanted to hire the most creative scientists, because obviously science is highly creative as well. And they commissioned these researchers, Lan and Jarman, and the study was so compelling that Lan and Jarman ended up tracking 1,600 kids from ages 5 through adulthood. And they tested them sort of on their levels of creativity at these different ages. And at age 5, I think 98% tested at a genius level for creativity. And by 25, it was like
5%.
5%.
It dropped significantly each year, like down to 30% by the time they were 15. So
yeah,
they proved that creativity everyone has it, but it needs to be nourished.
And
it's a natural human trait.
And there's like a famous TED Talk about this too, but our education system with emphasis so much on like the finished result and like the end product does create a lot of like shame and perfectionism around creativity that kind of beats it out of people. So you again have to actively nourish it to keep it alive. But obviously there's going to be certain people who are born with more aptitude for technical drawing and things like that. I mean, that goes to like motor control.
Right.
So it's not just that. It's like your ability to synthesize the world and come up with sort of new ideas and your sort of own point of view that the study was really testing. And so we're like, creativity truly is something like you need to think about nourishing it like you would take your muscles to the gym.
And keeping those connections open, I almost think of it like ideaphoria. Kids just have that naturally because everything is novel to them.
Yeah.
So to do these practices for yourself and like keep that part of your brain alive has such a positive impact.
Yeah.
But it does take the nourishment. It does take the time.
Now,
and then we got
do you think this is something you can get back? So you said, went from 98% to 5%, but you can gain it back with the practice.
Yes, we do. And it's
100%.
And it's very easy. It's not like you have to sit down and learn how to draw. It can be just a noticing practice. And just the other study that you brought up, which was conducted by Daisy Fancourt, who's a scientist out of the UK, very recently did a couple of year long study on people doing not just something creative, but even like looking at art. And what she discovered is even a few minutes a day of a creative act or looking at art has deep benefits for mental and physical well-being. So even a few minutes a day. And that was sort of groundbreaking for us because before that, there have been a lot of studies connecting, creativity to wellness. But the fact that you can go on a walk and just take time away and do some noticing or, spend some time doodling for 3 minutes, really easy, simple things can be done. It does have an impact. And so the New York Times wrote a big article about it in February, right before the book came out. Yeah. And
as you said, calling it the
Yeah.
fifth pillar of wellness, which
Yes.
we've long been an advocate for, like, creativity is the new wellness and it's about to explode because the benefits are like deeper even than meditation, like just in terms of like your brain plasticity, dementia prevention, all the exercises with doing things with your non-dominant hand and all the creation of new neural pathways. So it basically creates more cognitive flexibility, like practicing creativity for a few minutes a day, more cognitive flexibility, lowers cortisol and stress, creates more open-mindedness, lowers bias. There's just so many incredible, incredible benefits, yet 75% of people self-identify as not creative. So we were like, there's the opportunity, is like to convert, to make something that's easy and accessible enough for a short attention span generation of people who consider themselves not creative and are currently missing out on all those incredible benefits. So that's really our mission.
Yeah. Yeah. This is like hitting on a personal level. I know that you've seen some of my social media, but I went back to ballet.
Yes, I
that. I was
love
so
that.
proud of you.
Yes,
Yeah.
you're like poster child for daily
Yeah.
creative.
Yeah. And I will say, I went back for a lot of different reasons, but I feel it's like hard to even put into words, but I do feel like calmer. I feel just better physically and mentally. And it is very challenging, cerebrally, if that's a word. Like, I mean, ballet is so technical with like every little bit needs to be everywhere. So I really have to lock in. I can only think of what I'm doing, but it really has made me feel just so much better as a person and less stressed. So I am a believer, big time.
That's amazing.
Totally.
Well, and the benefits affect all areas of your life, not just this one little sector.
Right.
So, it bleeds into other areas and in every way, which is feels great.
Absolutely.
I mean, as you said,
And I think as, not to totally niche us, but, as midlife women, I think it's so important outside of like the physiological changes that are happening in our body, but what's happening just in our lives. We're in the sandwich generation where we're taking care of aging parents and we have kids that are getting older, and that brings a whole other set of stressors. And so it's so important for us to be able to have something for ourselves. And this is such an easy practice. It doesn't have to be going back to a ballet class, but that's what's really beautiful with what you did with your book, that it's just so easy, these quick 5-minute practices. So we've really made a good case for this. And I know that there will still be pushback, because I work with clients all the time, and we typically work with creativity when it comes to branding and marketing themselves and their businesses. And there just is that talk track of, but I just can't, I'm just not creative. I think the first thing, at least for me, a lot of times is identifying where those beliefs came from. And you touched on this a little bit, but can we just dive a little bit deeper into where you all think that seed maybe was planted, and how do we start there and then rewire some of those beliefs around creativity?
Yeah.
I would say, I mean, it certainly could be at school or through your parents in childhood, in terms of like having that, like, oh, I'm not creative thought in your head. But I think humans are they naturally compare themselves to others. So if you're in an art class as a kid and it's not your thing, and someone else is creating this like perfect horse, then you might say, well, okay, maybe I'm just not good at that, because you're comparing yourself. And I think it's just kind of a natural thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I do think part of it is the educational system and the way that we teach art in schools. Like ideally you'd have a studio where people could go like do clay, or they could do, drawing, or they could do dance, they could explore sort of what works for them. But I do think a lot of it is shame, childhood shame of maybe not being as technically adept at one of the creative practices presented to you in school.
It could be anything. It could be,
Yeah. And then that shuts
sports.
you off from trying. And then the perfectionism, and especially as women and comparing ourselves to others. So we're just trying to slowly unwind that with very low stakes exercises. Like, you should consider, like, you don't need to show your book to anybody, or we actually offered free downloadable worksheets online. Like, you can print out as many as you can, crumple them up, do the exercises on scrap paper, like, but you're not looking for a gold star on your piece of paper. You're just looking, the beauty is in the act of doing it, and then consider it,
Yes. But I
put it away.
Also, some of the exercises are very straightforward. Like, you're making lines, either a diagonal or straight. They are not it's not a drawing exercise. It's you're doing something very rote and kind of simple that you could even doodle, and the outcome based on the instruction ends up looking kind of cool. So I do think in some of these exercises, there's like going to be a surprise element. You're like, wow, this is actually really cool.
No, you're right.
And it's not even designed to do that. It's just designed for to get your brain into that creative state, but they're not intimidating. And, some of them are words, some of them are just noticing. So I think, if people can dive into this and pick a few things that they like, they can turn to any page and find it, and then just give themselves 3 minutes, they will find that thing that kind of rewires, as you say, the thinking of fear, shame, I can't do this, I'm not creative.
Yeah.
And it can be very simple. It can be about like walking to your dog a different way, or like eating a new food, because with ballet, I know ballet wasn't new for you, that it was more of like a returning, but what it's doing is it's putting something really new, a new challenge in front of your brain. And our brain, especially in this age of like automation and AI, is getting really lazy, and the right brain is getting underdeveloped, because there isn't enough friction. There's not enough sort of new novel challenges. So even if you do nothing else, like you're not even picking up a pen or anything, but you're trying to introduce a little bit of novelty and friction into your day by doing new things, maybe eating with your non-dominant hand, but just mixing it up. All of that is incredible for cognitive flexibility and starts building like a foundation of creativity.
Yes. Yeah. That's such a good point about the automations, AI. We are getting lazy, because there's so much that's at our fingertips that can make everything so much easier. And it's as someone who loves writing and loves doing everything, it's very tempting to just, something else can make it faster, and I don't have to do it. So, but the risk is so high of, what is happening to our brains. So that's such a good point. Do you think that some of the I'm not creative could be a generational thing? Like you grow up hearing your parents say it, and then you just kind of buy into that?
I hope so. I mean, I feel like we're almost trying to teach people how to live creatively or value creativity as something they want in their life. And it's something that everyone should have, like a pillar of health.
I do wonder if like our kids' generation, like I do think, as much as I struggle with it, like TikTok and Instagram, they do give you, those can be platforms for being creative, and Canva, and like there are a lot of tools now, Pinterest, that allow kids to participate in creativity. So I do wonder if that generation defines themselves as a little bit more open-minded in terms of whether they're
It's creative. A great question.
But we're on a mission to eliminate the phrase "I'm not creative" from the lexicon.
Yeah. So what does life look like if we eliminate it? If people embrace it, and in a perfect world, everyone understands that they are creative in their own way, how do people's lives change?
Well, I mean, I want to start with just like the big pie in the sky. We truly think the world would be a better place if everybody could tap into their creativity. If you think about cognitive flexibility and like how creativity actually lowers bias, it actually celebrates diversity, because diverse points of view actually create a better outcome in a brainstorm, in a session. So, with how divisive things are right now, it would be amazing if everybody could tap into their creativity, celebrate each other's, diverse opinions and diverse points of view, and, really like,
Yeah. I mean, well, and going back to the idea of creativity as a path to self-discovery and like getting to the core of your authentic self, I think the more people do that, the happier they are, the more they're walking in a direction that makes sense for them. So,
the less susceptible they'll be to rhetoric and brainwashing online.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
when you have your own point of view. So that's why we're so passionate about this work. Like we truly believe it's a huge mess that so many people consider themselves not creative.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is that deep, and you've made a beautiful case for it. I think when we hear, again, back to the beginning, when we hear it, we think, I can't, give me a blank canvas and I'm overwhelmed by it and I don't know what to do with it. But you have laid the case for it's so much deeper than that. And we can all find ways to be creative. And I love, Blythe, how you even said it's, pick up the fork with your left hand, your non-dominant hand, and eat with that, or walk a different way, when you're taking your dog out. Do little things like that, and it all adds up. And I do 100% believe, to your point, Mallory, it's a tool for self-discovery. And the older I get, the more I buy into the belief that that is just so important. It's just so important to understand ourselves. And I think that's the legacy we leave. I'm just really big into like legacy and what our kids seeing us do, because that is what they're going to grow up to do, whether they know it or not. And so I think it's just really important to understand ourselves and live these really authentic, vulnerable lives. And the only way we do it is to really know who we are. And creativity is such a great tool to do that. So this is
everybody deserves to feel that magic of finding that.
Yeah, it's part of your aliveness.
Yes.
And thank you for being such a supporter, Krista.
Oh my gosh, yes. I bought it from the minute that I heard about it. So you didn't have to sell me, but I think you did a fantastic job of selling the idea that everyone is creative. So talk just for a minute about the book, where people can get it. I know we've touched on it in our conversation, but tell everybody how they can get their hands on this beautiful book.
So this is the book. Again, it has over 60 exercises in it. And you can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, which compiles all the independent bookstores if you want to support independent bookstores. And it is under $20, so it's a great hostess gift. We love people doing it. One of the most rewarding things we've seen is people doing it with family members, like whether it's your aging parents or your kids, and using it as a tool to bring people together, like book clubs, creative supper clubs, just doing it with your girlfriends. So
it's great for all ages. And we also, my brother-in-law actually brought the book to work, and they just for one day was planning on doing an exercise with his team. And now they do it once a week, every week, because everyone kept asking, let's do that again. And he said he's learned things, they did the listening exercise, and it brought up things about childhood. And so they all talked about it, and they've gotten to know things that they never knew about each other. So it can be really bonding if you feel comfortable doing it. But it's also great to do alone if you're wanting to kind of privately make your drawings and not show anyone. That's fine too.
Yeah, I think it's such a great bonding exercise. In fact, I keep talking about the color naming, but the color naming for me was really nostalgic. I feel like so many of the colors that I came up with were it was like Grammy's Kitchen and all these things that brought me back to different memories. And then it's interesting to share. In fact, as I said, we have these on our kitchen table, and my nieces were over, and my sister and her husband, my brother-in-law, are highly creative people. And so my nieces were immediately in the books and was sharing. And so it's really fun to have. So definitely grab a few just to have on hand. They're a great gift, great to have around. And I'm just honored to have both of you here and loved the conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
It's been such an honor.
Thank you so much, Krista.
Gosh, yes.
In person.
Yes, I know. Well, when you said you were in New York, I was like, can I get to New York to interview you in person? I had that thought for sure. So maybe soon. Also, tell everybody where they can connect with you online.
Oh, great.
So, well, we have on Instagram, we're at daily__creative. And we also have a Substack, which you can link through to Instagram, which we usually post weekly. And we also have a website, dailycreative.com. And in all three places, you can find printouts of some of the grids and the things that we have in our book for free, and all sorts of information about how to do a creative dinner party,
And the science of creativity.
and the science, of course.
Great. All right. So we will link all of that in the show notes as well. So
Thank
you again, Blythe and Mallory. This was amazing.
Thanks, Krista.
Thanks,
All right.
Krista.
We will be back next week.